The elderly man shuffled into the courtroom, his hands cuffed, head bowed low. The clerk looked up and said, "State your name, please." His voice was soft but steady. "Samuel Mitchell, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps." No one present could have anticipated the story that was about to unravel. Minutes later, the female judge flipped through his case file. Suddenly, her hand paused. Her face paled. That name was familiar. The same man who had once carried her younger brother from the chaos of a firefight in Fallujah, only to disappear without a trace. Samuel Mitchell, 70, sat heavily on the courtroom bench, his worn military jacket hanging loosely on his frail frame. The harsh courtroom lights deepened the lines on his face, etched with decades of hardship. He was once a proud Marine in dress blues, medals gleaming on his chest. Now he awaited judgment in clothes donated from a shelter. The bailiff called the case. City of Westport versus Samuel Mitchell. Charges: disturbing the peace, trespassing, resisting arrest. Samuel rose slowly, joints stiff and aching from old injuries endured in Vietnam and Iraq. Wounds both visible and hidden, carried without complaint for years. The prosecutor, a young and polished man with rehearsed delivery, stepped forward. "Mr. Mitchell has been warned repeatedly about lingering near the Jefferson Street Cafe. The owner has filed multiple complaints this month alone. But what was left unsaid was this: Samuel never begged, never sought charity. He simply sat near a vent trying to find warmth on freezing nights. When the arresting officer testified, he claimed Samuel refused to leave when ordered. The truth was, Samuel had quietly asked for a few more minutes to finish half a sandwich a kind-hearted cook had slipped him. His words, however, fell on deaf ears. "This is his third citation this year," the prosecutor continued. "We recommend 30 days of community service and a downtown no trespass order. Such an order would block Samuel from the 4th Street shelter, the only refuge from the cold, and from community meal programs." Judge Margaret Ellis finally addressed him. "Do you have legal representation?" she asked. Samuel shook his head. His public defender had been pulled to another case. "Would you like to speak on your own behalf?" she inquired, peering over her glasses. Clearing his throat, Samuel's voice was low and rough. "No excuses, Your Honor. I just needed to stay warm." The judge's expression remained unreadable as she pressed, "Why that location?" Samuel hesitated. "Jimmy, the cook, leaves food sometimes. I've known him since I was a boy. His father served with me in Desert Storm." The judge's tone softened as she asked, "And your service?" "United States Marine Corps," Samuel said, straightening. "1976 to 1996. Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. Iraq." Those words carried decades of pride and pain, finally finding voice. Judge Ellis made a quick note but then stopped, reading deeper into his military history. Before she could speak, the courtroom doors opened. A sharply dressed man in a tailored Navy suit entered, walking purposefully to the defense table. Setting down his briefcase, he faced the bench. "Your Honor, I am Andrew Monroe, newly retained counsel for Mr. Mitchell. I apologize for the late notice." Samuel looked confused. He hadn't called a lawyer. He certainly couldn't afford one in a suit with polished shoes. "This is unusual," Judge Ellis remarked, watching carefully. Monroe responded calmly, "I request a brief recess to consult with my client." The judge nodded. "Court will recess for 15 minutes. Once the doors closed, Samuel whispered, "I don't have money for this." Monroe replied softly, "You won't need it. My firm is taking this case pro bono." Samuel furrowed his brow at the name Ellis. "Exactly like the judge," Monroe confirmed. In her chambers, Judge Margaret Ellis removed her glasses, hands trembling slightly. 20 years on the bench had taught her control, but nothing prepared her for this. "It can't be," she whispered, clutching a weathered photo of herself standing with her brother, Lieutenant Michael Ellis, in marine dress blues, smiling hopeful. Beside it lay his final letter from Iraq, edges worn from years of grief. In that letter, Michael described a harrowing firefight outside Fallujah. His unit was pinned down until Staff Sergeant Samuel Mitchell charged through enemy fire, dragging a wounded Marine to safety and covering the retreat. 2 weeks later, Michael died from an IED. She remembered the funeral, the folded flag, and the Marine who had approached her family. "Your brother saved my life," he had said, leaving the sentence unfinished. She had never forgotten that name. Years ago, she searched for him, but the military said he'd redeployed immediately. Later, she learned he'd been discharged with severe PTSD and traumatic brain injury. Now, 2 decades later, he sat before her. A knock broke the silence. Monroe entered, concern etched on his face. "Margaret, what is this?" "It's him," she said, motioning to the photo. "The Marine who saved Michael." Monroe's face shifted in realization. "The homeless veteran in your courtroom?" "Samuel Mitchell," she confirmed. "His record shows Fallujah 2004. Same unit as Michael. Awarded the Silver Star for that battle." "Does he know who you are?" Monroe asked. "Unlikely," she said quietly. "I married and changed my last name. He wouldn't recognize me. 20 years is a long time." "How does a hero end up like this?" Monroe asked. She sighed. "PTSD. Lost family. Benefits lost in bureaucracy. Construction work ended by injuries. Eviction. The streets." The judge closed her eyes. Michael's voice echoed in her mind. "Mitchell was the best of us. A Marine who risked everything for his brothers." Monroe's voice softened. "You could recuse yourself." "No," she said firmly. "I won't let him disappear again. There are ethical risks, but also obligations, especially to those who serve." Back in court, her voice steady but eyes wet, Judge Ellis addressed the courtroom. "Mr. Monroe, has your client made a decision?" He stood, calm and composed. "Yes, Your Honor. We move to dismiss all charges. Mr. Mitchell wasn't trespassing. He was trying to survive the cold. Restaurant staff gave him implied permission." The prosecutor opened to object, but the judge silenced him. "I have questions for the defendant." Turning to Samuel, she asked, "Your file lists Fallujah, 2004. Is that correct?" Samuel straightened, decades of instinct returning. "Yes, ma'am. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines." "On April 17th, were you part of an operation near the city's western edge?" "Yes, ma'am. Escorting a convoy when ambushed." "Did you rescue a wounded officer, Lieutenant Michael Ellis, under fire?" Recognition flickered in Samuel's eyes. "Yes, young lieutenant. Took a hit trying to save a medic. I pulled him behind cover, even as he told me to leave him." A silver-haired Marine in the gallery leaned forward, alert. Judge Ellis asked, "What became of Lieutenant Ellis?" "We evacuated him to Germany," Samuel replied softly. "He survived a while, but later was killed by an IED. I've wondered if saving him only delayed the inevitable." The Marine in the gallery stood. "That's him, Staff Sergeant Mitchell. I was there. He saved 6 of us." The courtroom murmured. Judge Ellis tapped her gavel, calling order, though her voice lacked its usual strength. Samuel kept his gaze low, uncomfortable with attention. The older Marine continued, "Your Honor, I witnessed Sergeant Mitchell take 2 rounds while pulling that officer to safety." The prosecutor stood. "While commendable, his service is irrelevant to these charges." Judge Ellis interrupted. The court disagrees. It is deeply relevant. She recessed the court for 10 minutes and ordered Samuel remain. As she left, their eyes met. Mr. Mitchell, she said softly, when I return, there are matters beyond this case we must discuss. In chambers, Judge Ellis's hands trembled as she called Colonel James Matthews. Within minutes, 3 Marines arrived. A colonel, a master sergeant, and a corporal with a polished case. Gasps filled the room. Samuel stood, stiff but proud, muscle memory overpowering time. Judge Ellis addressed the court not as a judge, but as a person. I must share a personal connection, she said, looking at Samuel. Lieutenant Michael Ellis was my brother. The courtroom gasped. Michael wrote of a staff sergeant who saved his life under fire, a man who refused to leave his unit behind. Her voice wavered, eyes wet. That man is Staff Sergeant Samuel Mitchell. The Marine from earlier stepped forward. It's true. I saw it. Judge Ellis continued. 2 weeks after that battle, my brother was killed in action. Marines told our family of his courage and of the man who bought us time. She looked at Samuel. I searched for you after Michael's death. The Marine Corps said you redeployed. Later, discharged. No one knew where you went. Samuel was silent, emotions rising. I never stopped searching, she said. Now, fate has brought you here. Colonel Matthews stepped forward. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, your personnel file was reviewed under the Veterans Reconsideration Initiative. Opening the case, the corporal revealed a Navy Cross. By order of the Secretary of the Navy Cross is awarded for extraordinary bravery on April 17, 2004. Gasps echoed. Previously classified parts of your mission have been declassified. The colonel continued. Your Silver Star has been upgraded. Samuel clenched his jaw, breaking composure. There must be some mistake. I just did my job. No mistake, the colonel said firmly. From the gallery, veterans rose and saluted. The prosecutor approached, apologizing sincerely. Samuel stood, dignity restored, decades of unspoken honor lifting. Judge Ellis stepped down, voice filled with meaning. My brother told us, no Marine left behind. Today we keep that promise. 2 weeks later, Samuel stood before a mirror in a quiet apartment, part of a veterans housing program. On the wall hung his Navy Cross and medals, recovered after years in storage. A knock at the door brought Judge Ellis. No robes, just herself, carrying a box of letters from Michael. She handed Samuel a letter dated the day after he saved Michael. His hands trembled reading the words. Michael wrote, Thanks to Staff Sergeant Mitchell, I survived the ambush. No Marine left behind, never on his watch. Samuel's voice cracked. He looked up to me. He was a good officer. He cared for his men. Judge Ellis smiled softly. After Michael's death, I went to law school. The Veterans Court and housing programs started because of these stories. Samuel replied humbly, I'm no hero. I just did my job. That's what heroes say, she said. She added quietly, one last thing. The day Michael died, he was leading a mission to protect civilians. He wanted to live up to your example. The words hit Samuel harder than any wound. For years, he'd questioned whether saving Michael mattered. She said gently, He didn't die because of you. He lived because of you. They sat silently as snow fell outside. Finally, Samuel whispered, For years, I thought no one remembered. She nodded. We did. Michael did. I did. As she left, placing a hand on his shoulder, she whispered, The measure of a Marine isn't what he does in the crowd, but when no one watches. You lived that. Samuel stood taller than he had in years, a quiet strength shining from within. Someone remembered my name, he said softly. And in that moment, long-buried wounds began to heal. Not just for Samuel Mitchell, but for all forgotten heroes.